So, new faces.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Where'd you hear about it?
From the app, I'm new here in Austin, so I searched for Laravel meetups here in Austin. And
Yeah.
pretty nice, yeah. So that was my first meeting.
Yeah, good. Heard about it from the meetup. Okay, so let me know. Cool.
Yeah, meet up here as well. I went to one event.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear me, Caleb?
I went
Yes.
to one event a couple months
Can you hear
ago.
people chatting in the room right now?
I
It
can.
was one
Yeah.
that was going over Docker and Kubernetes.
Okay, yeah,
But I haven't been back since, it's been kind of busy.
yeah.
All right. So
So
I'm
good.
going to throw up a little
Okay.
intro
Good.
slide, do a little intro stuff,
Cool.
and then
Fresh blood, especially on.
after that I'll introduce you, and then it'll be all on you. Do you want to test the screen
Sweet.
sharing real quick?
How long am I shooting for?
You're our only speaker for tonight, so our cutoff time is 9 o'clock. So we've got about 2 hours to work with.
Cool. Okay. Sounds good. Did you ask me to share my screen?
Yeah, I just want to test to make sure, see what it looks like, and
Yeah.
so I can adjust white balance a little bit.
I'll mostly be in an editor. Is it helpful for me to switch to a light theme?
It's definitely going to be helpful to switch to a light theme.
Sounds good. What to do? Anybody have any good suggestions? Link.
You had an initial one that was
Link's
pretty
good.
good.
Is this good?
Yeah, that's good.
I can do something more contrasty.
That first one.
There was the first one you had, if you can bring up the light themes.
Is that out of focus or is it me?
Maybe a little bit.
Whatever your first search was.
Is that good? Visual Studio.
Yeah, that one was pretty
Yeah,
bright
that
and
was good.
contrasty.
That's gnarly in your face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we only have so much control on a light, and there's for some reason a light bulb right on top of the projector screen.
Nice.
Great.
I think the switches behind you will turn the lights on now.
This is for all the AV stuff. The one back there that I was fiddling with, but when I hit the off button, it wouldn't turn off. I'm gonna give it another try. We'll just have a meet up in the dark. There we go. All right, I think everything looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and
Okay.
switch on over to.
Can you fade me toward the audience?
Yeah, I'm
Is
gonna.
that-
I'm
is that
gonna.
good?
Yeah, once I finish my
You don't want
slide.
that.
Once I finish the slides, like do my 2 little intro slides, I'm gonna flip the laptop around.
Cool.
Actually, I might be able to convince that to work now. I'm in the preview active, but can you see the audience for the most part now?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect.
Howdy.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay.
Gonna give it like a minute or more too, just for people to trickle in. But we do have pizza on here on time and actually shut up. So please help yourself to some soda and pizza, and we'll get started soon.
Good.
our lovely sponsor.
The last speaker never showed?
No, last month, our other sponsor, company my co-organizer works for, ordered the pizza, had it scheduled to be delivered the same time I usually do to make sure it's early, and the pizza just no-showed.
Yes, yeah. One of the other.
The meat never showed?
Yeah, no pizza at any point in time. Whenever he called
And
Domino's.
then everybody left?
Yeah, like we called Domino's, and even like the meetup was done. Me and a few others that were going to just go get food somewhere else because we're hungry. And he's on the phone with Domino's, and they're still like almost aggressively like, "It's coming," and we're like, "I don't care. The thing's over now. We don't need the pizza. We needed it."
Took it home?
No, he just pretty much told the manager, "If you don't give me the refund, I'm going to give you a charge back and just take the pizza back." And finally they were like, "All right, here's your refund."
Nice.
Yeah. Technically, we said we're probably just going to not do pizza again, but then I forgot to have that conversation. So I was like, all right, I'll just do pizza again. I hope that shows up. And it's now proven that whenever I order the pizza, it shows up. Whenever my co-organizer orders it, it's late or doesn't.
He doesn't really order, does he?
He's on a list in every pizzeria in the area.
Yeah, apparently
As soon
Domino's
as they get
just
a call, you know.
Yeah, apparently Domino's just hates it.
There's worse enemies.
Yeah, it's true.
Are you going to be recording this?
I was actually going to ask. We're technically live streaming. Just the problem is with the live stream setup here. This live stream is going to be weird because it's really only set up to just show the person standing in the front of the room in front of the screen presenting. But this live stream is just going to be showing
Gotcha.
nobody and a disembodied voice talking. So it's up to you.
All right.
If
I'm going to hit record on my end because Zoom can record calls, so I'll just hit record and I'll just keep it for myself. I mean, if you want a copy, you could hit record, or I could send you the recording or whatever for later.
I'll go ahead and hit record. Actually, I'll just go ahead and hit record now in case if someone asks, then I can at least follow up with you, see if you mind, and then upload it somewhere to share with people.
Cool. Nice.
Find Zoom, record button. Did that request permission to record from you?
No.
Okay, I hit the record button, it just said, ask, please request record permission from the meeting host. I don't know how.
I didn't get a request. I can just hit record on my end and then send it to you.
Sounds good.
I don't know how to provide that. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. All right. I'm recording here.
Sounds good.
Ian, were you checking to see if that Dr. Pepper really came in?
Alright, I think that's good enough. If people show up a little bit later, that's alright, but I'm gonna go ahead and get things started. So, welcome to Laravel Austin Meetup. I see a few new faces, or at least faces I may have not seen in a long time. I'm also really bad with names and faces, so sorry. I want to thank our sponsors tonight, Modernize, for providing the pizza and sodas. They showed up this time and on time. It's a great feeling. Today's June 3rd, not our usual meetup time, but there was unfortunately a scheduling conflict at the Capitol Factory, so we couldn't meet this Thursday. A little bit of a spoiler into what the next slide is, which is no longer a spoiler because it's up on the screen. Next month's meetup will also be on a Monday instead of our usual Thursday. So July 1st instead of July 4th, because for obvious reasons, no one's going to come to the meetup on the 4th of July. No one's also going to host the meetup on the 4th of July. So we'll be meeting next month on a Monday as well. The PHP meetup, Ops PHP, is next Thursday, June 13th. What's the down low on next week's?
It's like security related stuff.
Sweet.
Cryptography, I think. Yeah.
Ooh. So if you're interested in security, cryptography type stuff, highly recommend checking out Austin PHP next week. It's always a blast. As for conferences that are coming up soon, we have Laracon US, July 24th to July 25th. It's, last time I checked, still super sold out, so if you already got a ticket, hope you have fun. If you're on the waiting list, hope you actually get a ticket to go have fun. And if you're neither of those things, well, you can watch other people have fun from afar and still see whatever fancy new thing Taylor is about to announce. And then there's Mid-Atlantic Developer Conference, August 1st through August 2nd, and then Cascadia coming up as well. But that's really all that's going on in the world of conferences right now, unless there's one I'm forgetting, in which case, please let me know.
In which case, blame me because
Yeah.
I was the one who mentioned this conversation.
Yeah, Ian's the one who helped me fully source these because work today left me in brain fried mode, which I'm still in. So it's just like, Ian, please help. So that is all I've got for Backhouse update type things. I'm now pleased to introduce our speaker, who's on this handy-dandy laptop screen and also presented, Caleb Pariza. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. Take it away.
That's all right. Porzio, kind of butchered, but
Yep.
that's all right.
Porzio.
I butchered my fair share of names myself. So let me first. It's a pretty decently small crew. How many of you are Laravel developers? Like, this is a Laravel meetup, so is everybody Laravel or? Yeah, cool. So pretty much everybody's using Laravel on the daily. Is that right?
Say so.
Yeah. Can you guys, if you talk, can I hear you? You can probably talk, right?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Someone.
Ian, stop
Hello?
it.
Hello? What about this?
Like the lag is horrible, or there's bigger problems. Okay, great. So basically, I just want to start this off as being really informal. Meetup style presentation. So as soon as you have a thought or a question, you just interrupt me and shout something out. You see me mistyping a variable, let me know. Cool?
You in Florida?
Cool.
Interesting.
No, I snowbird in Florida, if you saw a video of me in Florida at some point, but Buffalo.
Okay.
Yep, cold Buffalo, yes. All right, so I'll share my screen and we will get to it. Oh, who's heard of Livewire? Has anybody heard of this thing, Livewire, that I'm working on? Raise your hand if you've heard it, because now you're really tiny on the screen. One.
I've heard it, but I guess I don't count because I'm the organizer.
All right, cool. Yeah, so it's something I've been working on for quite a while, and this is the first talk I'm giving. I'm going to be giving this talk, sort of something like this talk at Laracon, and then I'm also giving this talk at a million other meetups over the next couple of weeks. So you guys are the first ones, and so hopefully I take some good notes away from this, and you guys have some good feedback, so I can sharpen it. All right. Oops. Save changes where? Okay. So I'm going to start off with a spiel, and then we're just going to go right into code. All right, so JavaScript is crazy these days. I want to see your faces, so I'm going to put you in this mode. All right, is that okay? You guys still see it pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. JavaScript's crazy these days. This is just something that's been on my mind and in my heart. I do believe this, and I sound like an old man. I've been saying this for a little bit now, but I really feel this way. And I'm pretty plugged into the JavaScript community, and I use JavaScript all the time. And Livewire is written in JavaScript. But I think it's pretty darn crazy, and I think it's crazy by default. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. So this is the olden days of dynamic interactions on your web apps. Pages, you have jQuery or raw vanilla JavaScript. But when I came in, jQuery was the hotness, and you're selecting elements, you're listening for events, and then you're doing stuff to the page based on those events being fired. And to get here, we had a script tag. We included a bunch of JavaScript on the page. We either had a file ourselves or we used a CDN, and that's how we added dynamic interactions to our web pages. Definitely gonna do that more. So then this came along, Vue.js, and for anybody who's been in the Laravel community for some time, Jeffrey Way on Laracasts, he made a video about Vue and sort of brought it to the community. He made some videos on React, but they never really took. But he loved Vue, and he's a big reason why Vue is popular today. So I saw this, and I was floored. I saw this V model business, and it's immediately apparent what it does. And you can try it out in 2 seconds. You can pull in the Vue CDN at the time and try it out in 2 seconds, and it's just absolute magic, and it captured me. And it was so obvious to me why this is a better approach. Before, we're binding to events manually, and we're manually wiring everything up. Then this came, and it's all declarative, all the wires are handled for us. It's so obviously a step forward. And to get here, we do the same thing that we did before. We have a script element and an include, or a CDN. So same method, some different syntax, and a different core. Then there was this change down the road, a little farther down the road. Something happened where now, instead of pulling in CDNs for stuff, and instead of seeing that on the docs, you're seeing npm install. So now to get Vue, we're doing npm install Vue, and we're doing npm run watch. And when we run npm run watch, crazy things are happening. We're using Webpack or Gulp, and we have build process, and we're transpiling ES6 or TypeScript or JSX or whatever. We're using Node modules, and they're bundled with Webpack, and you have custom loaders, and we're minifying, and we're code splitting, and we're versioning, and we're cache busting, and we're doing all of these crazy things. And every time we save a file, this all happens. And that's just to get to this point. We're pretty much doing the same things. We're binding data. But you know, the community's evolved, the community's grown, the ecosystem's grown, and we're not just doing this, we're not just binding data anymore, we're using central stores because we're not using this for our whole front end, so we're using Vuex, and we're caching it in local storage. And we're routing on the front end now, so we're using Vue Router. And we're testing, we can't test with the easy way where we could before with BrowserKit or something. We're using Dusk or Jest or Phantom.js or whatever to test our front ends, if we're even testing our front ends. So it's a lot. It is a lot, and I feel that way. Yeah, so things got crazy somewhere along the way. So here's my beef with the front end landscape at the moment. I don't think that JavaScript is bad. I don't think that everything happening is bad. I think it's bad for some people, and I think it's better for other people. So here's my beef. Small to medium-sized projects are using tools meant for large projects. That is the summation of my thesis statement, is that it seems to me that now everyone is starting with the finish line. We're pulling in the world of node module dependencies and all of these techniques and tactics just to get started, where before we might have pulled in a CDN, or we would have accomplished plenty of things with just Glade, and then we would have sprinkled in JavaScript where we needed them. Now we're pulling it all in by default, and we're not thinking very critically on how much cost that's attaching to us. And by we, I really mean we. I'm very much in this boat myself. So every front end is somewhere on a scale of needs, right? Some front ends have simple needs, like toggling modals and showing and hiding content, or maybe showing a tooltip. And then you can slide that scale all the way to the other side, and you have Gmail or Figma, real-time web apps that are offline capable, progressive web apps, WebAssembly, animations, whatever. Every web app is somewhere on that spectrum. there's no one spectrum. It's a spectrum, right? Our tools should reflect that spectrum. So if our front ends are on a scale of needs, then the tools we're using to meet those needs should also be on a scale. If we need a tooltip, we shouldn't be pulling in, we shouldn't have a node modules directory, and we shouldn't be running a Webpack build. We simply need to show a tooltip. So my best guess as to how it got this way, I'm calling it the self-feeding loop. This is not scientific. I came up with this today. So there's, I'm sort of just was reflecting, thinking, how did I personally get here? You know, and mostly it's, you know, the Laravel community brought me here, I'll say. But here's how I think we got here. I think big companies, say Google, build a big tool. They have big needs, so they build a big tool, like Angular, or Facebook builds React. They build this tool, and they put out content about the tool. They open source it, they speak, their developer advocates speak at conferences, they hire for it. So they hire people who are developers in this tool now. And then this sort of trickles down, that the people attending those conferences, most of them aren't from those big enterprise companies, but they're being fed the wisdom of the big companies. So the big companies meeting a big need, and they're not necessarily, well, I won't say whose fault it is, but they're preaching the solution, and the listener isn't necessarily processing through the filter of the scale of their needs. So this thing, it sort of breeds, it becomes the zeitgeist. Like a big company creates a thing, it trickles down the conferences and teachers. So people like Laracasts and frameworks, they adopt these technologies and tools because it's an incentive for them. So for myself, I blog all the time. If a new technology comes out and I'm the first to cover it, so Jest, nobody was testing Vue components. So I wrote a blog post called Testing Your Vue Components with Jest. And it was very popular, and I was the first to write something about it. And that was beneficial to me. There's incentive for me to find solutions that are new and bring them into the community, because as a teacher, that's beneficial for you. So it's this loop that I'm sort of seeing. My brother is an HVAC technician, and I called him, and I asked him this question. I said, so let's pretend, I said, well, what's the size of a furnace of a normal house? And he said, probably 80,000 BTUs of an average house. And you walk into the house and you walk downstairs, and it's, he services furnaces, boilers. He walks downstairs and there's a 200,000 BTU furnace downstairs. What would you think? And he said, I would think that that somebody overestimated or whatever, that wouldn't happen. And I'm like, so you wouldn't walk downstairs and think, oh, this guy, he's an architectural astronaut and he thinks everything should be, right? He's like, no, not really, because they're just wasting money and people don't really want to waste money. So it got me thinking that, like in construction and in HVAC and trades like this that are a little more evolved, they don't necessarily, they wouldn't make this common mistake of pulling in the world and these big tools for big companies, because it literally costs them money on a daily. Like if you have a furnace that's too big for you in your house, you're overspending and you feel that burden and you want to be more efficient. Where for us, when a small project pulls in a big tool with big technologies and big techniques, we're not necessarily feeling that exact cost pain. We're more feeling the intangibles, like developer hour, man hours. And it's very hard, it's this very confusing thing to gauge how much harder something is for developers to manage. It's all very vague. So that's a long story of why I think we've gotten to the place that we've gotten to. Is everybody tracking so far? I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for a nod or something.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. All right, so what's out there for people in the middle? I think the majority of Laravel developers are somewhere in the middle. We need a little bit more than toggling a modal, but we're not writing Gmail. What's out there for people in the middle? And there are a few things out there. One that caught my eye as soon as I found out about it, TurboLinks. Raise your hand if you've heard of TurboLinks. Okay, cool, so this will be interesting. TurboLinks is absolute magic. It's put out by the Rails team, and it's built off a project called PJAX. TurboLinks, basically, you include it in your app with a CDN, like jQuery or something, and all of a sudden, when you click a link in your app that normally does a full page reload and go to another page, it does the request in the background over Ajax. It gets all the HTML, and then it replaces the body of that HTML with the currently loaded body without doing a full page refresh. So it's pretty crazy, and I'll show you exactly what it is and what it does. but it blew my mind when I saw it. So GitHub itself, GitHub's interface feels very much like an SPA, like a single page app. If I click on code and issues, there's no loading wheel in my Chrome tab. There's a little loading bar up here, but it's clearly not reloading the page. So let's take a look at the actual AJAX requests that are happening as I change here. So I just changed tabs and I'm looking at the AJAX request. And there is a AJAX request that is getting back HTML from the server. So they're not getting JSON and they're not doing a full page reload. They're getting HTML from the server in the background and then they're replacing the page. So GitHub uses PJAX, which is almost the exact same thing with some different syntax. So I started digging around GitHub's interface a little bit more, and I found that they use this tactic all over the place. And GitHub is not a Vue.js SPA. It's not a React SPA with GraphQL and all those things. It's a Rails application, just like our Laravel applications. And it has that Rails mentality, and you can see it if you sort of dig in and if you read their blog and you look at their source code. They're sort of keeping things very simple. So another place you might see this, let's go to, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna hover my mouse over, let's clear this. I'm gonna hover my mouse over this author dropdown. Can everybody see the screen decently well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna hover over author and it fires off an AJAX request in the background. And that AJAX request gets HTML that it's about to load if I click that dropdown, and then it loads the HTML. So it's pretty crazy. GitHub uses this technique all over the place to basically write an app that feels like an SPA. It feels like lots of JavaScript is happening, but in reality, they're using Rails to render these templates, and they're just fetching them over AJAX and replacing them in real time. And I think it's brilliant. When I first got wind of this technique, it was just like, it lit me up. It was like, whoa, I could have the benefits of a JavaScript front end with dynamic interactions, but I could use Blade to render templates, and then I just have to kind of wire this out in the background. So one more quick example. This is actually the Livewire repository. I'll go to a GitHub issue, and let's say I go to transfer an issue. All right, it pulls up this modal, which, by the way, the modal is 100% not JavaScript. It uses a details HTML5 tag, and it hijacks it with CSS. So there's tons of not JavaScript in GitHub. Okay, so then this loads, and I'm going to search for Laravel. Okay, and then this drop-down loads right here of my results, and I'll show you the AJAX request. So I sent a request. And it says /issue/transfer form possible, whatever, query Laravel, and then the response is HTML. And as I type, it takes the query and sends it to the backend, and instead of the backend sending JSON back, and then it having like a view component that consumes the JSON and traverses through it, it's just calling over to the Rails app and it's saying, get me the template rendered already so I don't have to deal with it. Is everybody tracking on what's happening here, this concept?
Yes.
Is anybody not tracking or confused? Or has any questions or thoughts at this point? No?
No.
Okay. All right, so this lit me up. Fast forward a couple of years, and Phoenix, Elixir is a language, it's a functional language, so Elixir is to PHP, as Phoenix is to Laravel. Phoenix is the web application framework, MVC framework for Elixir. And the guy, Chris McCord, who wrote Phoenix, he put this demo out. He demoed this at a called Phoenix Live View, this project. And so he's showing all these crazy things that look like normal front-end things. And he shows a thermostat somewhere. Where's the thermostat? Maybe it's, I'll reload, see if it's there. Okay, well, I guess it's part of the slide or something, whatever. So he shows this thermostat where he's clicking a plus sign and the temperature is increasing and decreasing. And then he shows the code that he wrote it with. And he has a div and a span and A tags, and they have this Phoenix click. And it's kind of like Vue's at click or V on click, except what he puts in there, he's actually calling backend code. So if you read the whole article, it's pretty ridiculous, but basically he has templates, like in our example, like blade templates, that instead of calling JavaScript, they can somehow magically call PHP. Like, it blew my mind. And so I got to hacking and I made a little proof of concept. Fast forward 5 months, I've worked on it like all the time, and it's come quite a long way. And it is Livewire, and that's what I'm going to show you. So let's dive into Livewire. Okay. So I have a Laravel app. It's pretty much a fresh install. Here's a root route and then a welcome file, welcome.blade.php. I use a lot of Command P to hop between files. If this is confusing for you, let me know and I'll pull open the sidebar and click through files. So welcome.blade.php. This is the normal template you get with Laravel. There's HTML, there's some basic, I'm pulling in some like Bulma CSS and a body tag. So there's nothing special here. This is literally HTML. If I type hey, save it, and refresh, I get hey, okay? So we're starting completely from scratch, and we're gonna install Livewire. Composer, require, Caleb Porzio, Livewire. It's not actually public at the moment, so you couldn't do this in your own app right now. We'll get to that later. Okay, so composer, require, Livewire. That's gonna work and be done in a second. And then the final thing to get this working and set up is Livewire assets. And it's a little custom blade directive that loads up everything Livewire needs loaded on the front end. And that's it. As soon as this is finished, Livewire is completely installed and ready to go. That's totally the installation. There's no WebSockets, there's no anything crazy. It's all, it's just 2 steps, that's it. So let's recreate that thermostat functionality. I'm gonna create a counter where we have a count and we hit the plus sign and the minus sign and the counter updates. So let's create a component. In Livewire, Livewire is a component-based framework, just like Vue. So as we get into it, it's kind of a mind-bending thing at first, but Livewire is going to be kind of like this weird mixture of Vue and Blade, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So Livewire components are pretty much like Blade includes, but they have a lot of magic and weirdness. So if we could make a counter.blade.php file and include it like this, right? But instead of that, we're going to do Livewire. Okay, and now we need to create that component. And we have a artisan command for that. Make Livewire counter. Okay, I created 2 files, and we'll take a look at these 2 files. We have a new app, HTTP Livewire directory. That'd be right next to your controllers directory. That's where the component class is. And then the view, the blade view, is in views/Livewire. So let's take a look at counter. This is the component class. Now think of this like the JavaScript portion of a Vue component. Class counter extends component, and then we have a render function. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with React, but it's sort of like that, where React has a render method. And the render function or method returns blade. So this is pretty much like a normal Laravel controller where you're returning blade. You can pass in data to the blade view and whatever. Okay, so let's take a look at that view. So resources, views, Livewire, counter. And then we have a boilerplate bootstrapped file. Nothing in the world is as soft as and yielding as water. Thank you for the wisdom, Livewire. Okay. So hello world. So just to track, we're working with 3 files. A welcome.blade.php, including the Livewire component, the actual component class, and then the view that the class renders. And then let's load our page. Okay. And hello world. So one thing to note already is that this is SEO friendly. It's all just Blade the first time. So it's just PHP the first time. All right. Now let's add some craziness. So I'm going to make a property called count, set it to 1. If you're familiar with mailables in Laravel or notifications, or I think even jobs are like this, it's kind of like that where any public property, I make it available in the view, so you don't have to do this. You don't have to do count, right? So it's just going to be available in the view. So let's go to counter blade. Okay, hello world, and I'm going to create a div with a title. Oops. And we're just going to echo this out. Okay. And there we go. Normal blade, nothing astounding yet. We're just setting data and we're rendering it. Now let's get funky. So I'm going to make a plus button and a minus button. And I'm going to add some fancy syntax. In Vue.js, raise your hand if you've used Vue, if you're familiar with Vue.js. Okay, about half, a little bit less. All right. For those familiar, this will be familiar. You'll have lots of anchor points to understand this. For those not familiar with Vue.js, it might be a little bit harder. So stop me if something is tripping you up, and I mean that. Just raise your hand and stop me. So in Vue, you would do v on click and then specify a method like increment, right? Or that shorthand syntax, add click. With Livewire, it's wire colon. So a lot of the Vue directives are kind of available with this wire colon syntax. You do that again, wire colon click, decrement. And here, I'm just passing in an event. This could be any event that the DOM element bubbles up. It could be input, it could be a custom event, it could be key down, but we're just listening for a click. And then we're going to fire increment, and we're going to fire decrement. Okay? So let's create those methods. Increment, and this is just going to increment the counter. And then this is going to be decrement. It's going to decrement that count property. Okay. So there's our code. Let's render it in the browser. And now when I click plus, the number updates. When I click minus, the number updates. Okay. This is one of those show-stopping moments, I'm hoping. You're going, whoa, that's crazy. So that is Livewire. It's completely Blade. This is actually Blade. And then there's directives that JavaScript sort of picks up. So under the hood, if we look at the network requests, I hit plus, and there's a new AJAX request. And it sends over some data, and then it renders the blade, and we get the HTML back, and then it takes the difference. It does a difference DOM diff, and it updates only the parts that updated in the DOM. That makes sense? Tracking?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions so far? Is anyone confused?
About this?
No? All right. Okay, right. All right, so that's the counter. I'm just going to walk you through some of the other basic functionality of Livewire, and then we can do a little bit of a more thorough example. So pretty much like Vue.js, where you can bind, where you saw vModel before, like you can bind data to input elements. Same thing in Livewire. So let's create an input element. And then where in Vue, you would do vModel title or whatever. We'll say text. You do vModel text. In Livewire, we're doing wire model text. Okay. And then we'll add text as a data property. And we'll set it to empty string for now. Okay? So just to reiterate, we bound this data wire model on the input element, and we created the property. So let's actually show it so we can see something happening. And we'll do text. Okay, just using Blade to echo it out. All right, so updating still works, but then when I type, it's updating based on the things I type. And it's automatically debounced by 100 or 150 milliseconds. So if I type really fast, it won't update anything until I let it up for a second. I can type all this and then let up, and then it'll update. So you're not firing off a zillion AJAX requests. There's fine-tuned control over that debound, so you can customize that. Okay, so there you go. So that's an input element binding. Let's do a checkbox binding, just as another example. So you can wire model any input element, select element, or checkbox or radio button. So let's make a Boolean, called Boolean make this a checkbox. Okay. And then here we'll JSON encode out this Boolean. Okay. And now we just need to add a property called Boolean. And we'll start it off as false. Okay. So now when I click, it's true and it's false. Then I can type, and that still works, and increment, decrement, and that still works. That's all reactive. Great, so I'm gonna show you two more things, and then we'll get moving on. So similar to a Vue component, Livewire has lifecycle hooks. So in Vue, there's a created hook, and that method runs every time a Vue component is created or on the page, it's like instantiated. So instead of that, Livewire has mount. And in mount, you can do anything to the class. It's almost like a constructor. But one cool feature of it, you can pass stuff into it. So let's pass an initial message into it. Say initial text, and then we'll set text to initial text. Okay? And now we're going back to welcome.blade.php, the base HTML file where we include Livewire, like a Blade include. And we'll pass in an initial message. We'll say hello worlds. Okay. And now if I refresh, we have hello worlds there. All right, so in addition to the mount lifecycle hook, there's a few. There's updating and updated, which fire before, as the data is being updated and after it's updated. So in an updated hook, you can do anything and it'll fire when the component's updated. So let's make text all caps. So string to upper this text. Okay. Let's refresh that, and now as I type, it'll make the text all caps. So one thing with this though, so notice everything is not uppercase. As soon as I click, it hits the updated hook, and then we uppercase everything. It also would do this on any update, so if I update like this count, it'll also run that updated. It's just a general updated. So you can scope the updated to specific attributes, kind of a Laravel model type way. So we'll say updated text, and now this will only run when text is updated. So let's refresh, and I click this, and it doesn't string to upper, but I update the text, and it does string to upper. Okay. So those are the lifecycle hooks, and that's basic data binding, and that is the 101 of Livewire. There's lots of other things, but that's the basic syntax and functionality. Any questions so far? Thoughts?
So for the
question.
Yep. For the requests that are going back and forth, can we take a look at the requests and responses? Because obviously there's some level of context that's coming from the page that is being pushed back into the server on every single request.
Yes, definitely. So I hit increment, and we can just dissect it, and I'll show you. So the big one is data. This is the context. Data is a plain JSON object, and when this comes back, Livewire will go through that data, and it will, what's the word, hydrate this Livewire component with the data that it gets back. And then there's almost like commands. I had this little queue. Oh, sorry, that's the return. There's still data in the request. Here's the request. There's a bunch of other security things, like it knows about middleware, and it does fancy things so that it's totally secure and you can't hijack another component or something. Checks on all sorts of security things. But this is the action queue that it'll run all these actions on the component. And this is call method is the action here, and then it has a payload. Call method increment, and pass in these parameters, just nothing. So at its core, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, here's all the data to set on the component, and now run a method, and then give me the Blade output. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Originally, the first demo I made was not Ajax. It used WebSockets, which is Phoenix LiveView. They use WebSockets. But PHP is really bad at having long-running connections. Like PHP, by nature, is destroy everything, architecture or whatever, that I forget the name. Every time the world is created and destroyed every single request. So having long-running PHP instances, there's huge benefits because I literally had a long-running PHP object. Your component was an object in memory that would respond to requests. So I didn't have to keep track of data or anything because the instance did, but WebSockets for PHP just aren't there. So I really went to town on it. And at the end of the day, so Livewire is not going to replace JavaScript. It's going to work in tandem with it. So things you're already using Ajax for, Livewire is the golden ticket. And then there's a whole class of other things that you might be able to use Livewire for if your requests are fast, and your payloads are small. But otherwise, you might just stick to JavaScript.
So on the response side of things, it looked like you were handing back JSON with values in there rather than doing some sort of HTML partial rendering thing like the GitHub example?
Yeah, so it is like the GitHub example. There is this DOM, and that's rendered blade. So this part is the GitHub example, that it's straight rendered blade with the data in it. But I also pass back the data because I don't expect you to understand this at first glance because some of these things are really brain busters because you're switching back and forth contexts. But in order so this is what I would have to do before, basically. Like in Vue.js, how vModel is syntactic sugar for binding value and listening for input, it would be the same thing. vModel, WireModel is the same thing, but without having access to the data, JavaScript doesn't have any idea about the data. It would only get DOM back, and then it couldn't be smart. And it was sort of this crossroads for me, is do I make Livewire smart enough that you can just wire model, or do I make it dumb like TurboLinks and just do DOM diffing? And the benefits were just too far on the scale to do this approach. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense, and thanks for the clarification.
Cool. Good questions. Love the questions. If anybody's got them, makes me know you're alive. Okay, so that is the basic tour. I want to do a to-do MVC. So to-do MVC is kind of like a framework usability benchmarking tool. It's a way to have a standard need and application and everything to test against a bunch of JavaScript frameworks. So most JavaScript frameworks have a to-do MVC, and it's their own, I don't know, I mean, it's their to-do app. That's a bad metaphor. Okay, Zoom is in the way of my tab, so I can't see, but this is Vue's to-do MVC. So if you go to Vue.js's docs, they have a to-do MVC, and pretty basic. You type something, it adds a to-do. You can complete to-dos, you can remove to-dos, you can mark them all as done, you can filter them, and you can clear completed. So there's to-do MVC, and that's Vue.js's version of to-do MVC. So I want to try building it in Livewire and show you how you do it in Livewire. Good? Good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to go. All right, so I have another route called /to-do. So let's go there. All right, and that, similar to welcome, this is the whole thing: HTML, head, body, some CSS. All right, so let's create a new Livewire component. First, we need to include Livewire on this page itself. Livewire assets. Okay, and then Livewire. Oops. Livewire, and this is going to be called to-do MVC. Great. So artisan make Livewire to-do MVC. Great. So here is the Livewire component. It's that class with the render function. And it's returning that view. And let's go check out that view. And there's probably some more wisdom waiting for us. To-do MVC. Okay. Stop trying to control. It's a message. Okay, so I have a stub for all the markup for to do. So let's find that. To do stub. Right. So copy and paste this whole thing. There's a little header, the body, and a footer. The filtering's in the footer. The body has the list of to-dos, and then the header has the input tag for the to-dos. So I'm going to save this, and with any luck, I refresh, and we see to-dos. Okay. So let's get started. One different thing that I'm going to do, if we were doing this in Vue, you would do something like, I don't know, title would be a piece of data that you would bind to the input element. And then you might have to-dos, which is a bunch of to-dos. And we can certainly do that in Livewire. But the power of Livewire, because you're actually using PHP to do it, is you can use your database with Eloquent. So to accomplish the same thing in Vue is just adds another layer of complexity, like you're managing stuff in the front end, and you have to keep it synced to the back end and manage JSON endpoints and have them all tested and everything like that. So here, I'm going to use this table in my application called to-dos. There's one to-do called there. We'll say hello world. Okay. And so I can get rid of this, and we'll see this in a minute. So my first order of business is to show the to-dos from the database. So I want to loop through the to-dos, and right now our tactic is pretty much just like you would in Blade. So in my render function, I'm going to pass in to-dos and to-do all. Import that. To-do is a plain model. This is the to-do model, and I have some helper functions toggling it to complete and not complete, scopes to search for complete active. So simple, straightforward, eloquent model. All right, so this is just like Blade. We're passing in data, so we have to-dos, and then let's loop through them. So here's the LI in the UL that we can loop through. Use as to-do. Okay. Okay, and then right now thing is the placeholder. Let's change that to to-do title. And then when I refresh, with any luck, we'll see hello world. And there we go. Nice. So now we're generating this from the back end. But this is not impressive because you can do this in Blade anyway. Let's make it so that when we type in here, we can hit enter and it'll add a new to-do. So the input tag is right here. In Vue, you would do something, again, like click, and then add to-do, and then you would have a method called add to-do. Livewire, we do wire click, add to-do. Okay? And now we need a to-do method, so let's do that right here. Add to-do. And again, we can just set stuff in the database, and it's completely persisted because it's just eloquent. So to-do, create, title, this title. All right, so with any luck, refresh the page. Error, not null constraint, failed to-dos. Why is that? Oh, okay, right, so it's giving me a not null constraint. So usually this renders on the whole page, but for some reason, to-do MVC markup uses a head tag for this. It's pretty wacky, but anyway, this is another nice thing that when you're working with AJAX requests and it detects an error, it'll just show you in a full splash screen and take you back to an errorless state, which is nice. So integrity constraint violation, to-do.title is null, so or it can be empty. So this is an empty thing right here. How do we fill it with data? Binding. So we want to, why did I wire click? You guys should have caught that. Let me down. Wire model title, right? And we'll leave it at that for right now. So wire model title, then wire key down .enter. So if you use Vue, you're familiar with the syntax. It's the exact Vue syntax. you can put in any key you want here, escape, anything. Key down, and on key down, we want to add to do. So it makes sense, we have an input element,
You
a
want to
wire
key down
model
that enter
binding
there.
to the title attribute, so as we type, that attribute will update, and then when we key down enter, I should have got that too.
We did.
Sleeping on me. Someone did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone did. So we type in and we hit enter, and with any luck, we added a to-do. But this didn't clear. So this is just like Vue. It's the same kind of stuff you have to do in Vue. Set title empty string. And refresh. Hey there. Hit enter. And there we go. So basic add to-do functionality, and if we look, inside the database, we have our to-dos right there. So let's add remove to-do functionality when we click this close button. So we know we're going to need a method called remove to-do, so let's do that. Remove to-do, find, oh right, so we need to know the to-do to remove, so we're going to have to pass that in somehow. Find that to-do, and then delete it. Okay. So here is the button, class destroy, that's a little X. So we can add wire click, remove to-do. So you haven't seen this yet. So far I've just been adding methods for events, but you can pass in parameters, say specific ID, and then 12 would come through as the parameter right here. So we don't actually know the ID in JavaScript per se, so we can just echo it out in Blade. So to do, arrow ID. Okay. Now with any luck, we can hit X and we remove to-dos. And then if we look in the database, it reflects the exact changes. Great. So we're moving along at record speed. We're not writing endpoints or anything like that. They're just that's one of the weird realizations I had when I was building this. Is like, whoa, I don't need controllers anymore or routes for components like this. You know, it just you have access to anything you need access to, which is pretty cool and freeing. All right, so let's implement some more functionality. This is crossed off by default. We need some sort of completed functionality. So we need to uncross this, and then when we click this check box, we want it to cross off and reflect in the database. So in the database, there's this is complete field, and that's what we're going to set.
Caleb, ask a question.
Okay, so
Caleb, we got a
Somebody have a
question. Yep.
yeah.
By using Livewire, are you at that point coupling your front end to your back end?
Yes.
Okay, so if you were making
Totally.
the back end API, so you know, if you, I guess it goes back to your small, medium projects of if you were developing this for multiple platforms and wanting an API up front, then Livewire wouldn't be for you.
Totally. Yeah, Livewire would not be for you. This is for projects who can, whose backends are coupled with their frontends. And yeah, and that sort of speaks to my earlier point, like you just said, that there's a whole slew of projects in this middle ground that almost every client meeting I've been to or project planning meeting when we're about to start a greenfield project or something like that, someone always says, we should start with an API-driven approach because later on we're going to want a mobile app. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, if I had a nickel for every time we actually implemented a mobile app that utilized the same API, I would have 0 nickels. So it's one of those things that personally I think is jumped to the gun and is sort of viewed as this just by default beneficial architecture to separate front end and back end. But it's sort of the Rails philosophy, like empowering small teams to do big things. When you couple your front end and back end, your tests that are running in PHP, they can actually hit your front end instantly, you know, and render your template. You can reuse validation, you can reuse authorization, all that stuff, authentication. That when you're, you know, using a more SPA approach, you have to manage 2 things. You know, 2 apps are more complex than 1. So that's a soapbox. I apologize. Get off my lawn.
And then, have you had any experience with Meteor.js?
What's that? With what JS?
Meteor.js?
No.
Okay.
What's that?
It's just another JavaScript framework, but it couples, it's all built in JavaScript, but it couples the front end and back end so you can create, ambitious web apps. And I toyed around with it, but
Yeah.
one of the reasons I didn't go for it was you had to use MongoDB without a lot of complexity getting involved, and then
Gotcha.
you couldn't decouple the API.
Nice. Yeah. So I think I have heard of this. I confuse it with Polymer. Yes. That's awesome, and that's sort of the same idea. Sort of Ember is another popular JavaScript framework that's a full stack JavaScript framework.
Something
The
else
front end
called
knows about the back
concurrently.
end. What's that?
There's another one that's called concurrently. I heard about it on Saturday. I haven't had a chance to look it up too much yet.
Concurrently. Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, the benefits to coupling your back end and front end are just so huge. I'm not surprised that that the JavaScript world is. I mean, GraphQL is sort of a similar promise in a different way, but still sort of let your front end, make queries. Why not? So, interesting. I'll have to check that out. There's nothing. I don't understand it at the moment. Okay. So, nice. All right. So, tab. All right. So let's add this completed functionality so that we can click this thing and mark it to do as done and not done. So where is that? So here we are, and then here's a checkbox. That is the check mark. So we could wire model, but we're not going to do that exact approach for reasons. Like you saw before, like when I wire click, you can listen to any JavaScript event, any DOM event that bubbles. So we're going to listen to the change event because that's what a checkbox fires when it's changed. So basically we're saying on change, we want to mark it as completed. So let's say toggle to do, and then we'll specify the to do that we want to toggle. Okay. And then let's create a toggle to do method here. Okay, toggle to do, pass in the ID to do, and then I created a helper method to make this easier. To do find ID toggle. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Does not work, but I bet it does, and we're just not seeing it reflected. So it does work. It is complete. It's just not reflecting. So we're missing some markup. So this is completed. We want to conditionally show this completed class or not. So that's fine. We can use Blade for that. So we'll say to do arrow is complete. Right, and then we'll do a ternary. So I can put this class here or no class. All right, and then that is complete. And if we do that, it's incomplete, incomplete, active, complete. But that checkbox disappears really quick because, like I mentioned before, vModel or wire model is syntactic sugar for bind value down and listen for input up. If you've never had to do that in Vue, you don't understand what I just said, and that's okay. But basically what that means is I need to manually specify when this is checked or not. And if you're from the jQuery world, you're very familiar with techniques like this. So I need to manually specify when to put the checked attribute on the input element, which is pretty easy. So I'll just do to do is complete, then echo out checked, otherwise echo nothing. Okay? And now when we click, we get the full check and uncheck experience. And if I check, it's reflected in the database. If I uncheck, it's reflected in the database. All right, so we're totally getting there. Hey, again, there, one. Okay, so, and we can remove things and we can add them and we can toggle them. There's a couple more things that that we can do. Let's update this count. So here there's 0 items left. And so this means like how many are left to do. So anything that's not completed, we want to count inside of this count. So we're using Blade, so this should be no problem to just add a piece of data, say number of active to-dos. And then to do, I have a scope called active, and just run a count on that. And number of active to-dos would store that piece of data. So let's find where it says 0, right? So 0 items left. And I'll just echo Blade number of active to-dos. Okay. All right, so now it says 1 item's left, 2 items left, 3 items left. If you call it that, 2 items left, 1 item's left. It's plural, and so view went the extra mile and made it item and items, and they conditionally added the S. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of the demo. It's super duper simple, but to me it represents all the value I'm getting out of an approach like this. String plural. This method comes out of the box with Laravel, and you pass it a word, and then you pass it a number to reference when pluralizing. So now 1 item left, 2 items, 3 items, 2 items, 1 item. So again, this is just sort of that, you can use accessors on your models, all sorts of stuff. You can keep all your presentation isolated in PHP, which is pretty awesome, I think. Okay, so that's that functionality. Let's do this toggle all functionality. So this, when you click it, it should complete all, and when you unclick it, it should remove the completion from all. So in view, can't see my tabs. In view, it does that. So let's implement that. And to do that, there's so many, like Livewire is a basic set of tools, kind of like Vue, where you have lifecycle hooks, you have data, you have watchers, and you have some template render method. And you pretty much take that set of tools, same thing with React, and mix them to do what you need to do. So there's 100 ways to do anything. So here, this is the checkbox that does the toggling back and forth. So instead of doing a click and then setting it and detecting stuff, I'm just going to bind it to a piece of data. Wire model, let's say mark all, say. So mark all, maybe not the best name, but whatever. Mark all, and we'll say that starts off as false. Okay? And we're not going to see a difference, but when I click this, that data will update, right? But we're not using it anywhere, so we're not seeing it affect anything. So if you recall, the lifecycle hook I showed you updated, where we can scope it. So we'll say updated mark all, and then when that happens, we will we'll update all the to-dos to be completed or not completed. So let's get to-do, all, each, update. This is all just eloquent. And then we'll update is complete. And we'll make that the value of mark all. If it's true, they'll all be complete. If it's false, they'll all be incomplete. All right, so let's see if that worked. So there we go, and there we go. Cool. So that's pretty much the same. I guess a difference is, how is Vue different? If we click, right, we click both, and then this toggles to on. So we can mimic the same functionality if we want. So we could say, how would we do this? I'm improvising here. Every time this is updated, if they're all updated, then you can set it to true, like in add to do. But that would be a separate query, and I don't really want to do that. So I think what I want to do is, when I deselect one, so if I deselect this, I want this to show up as empty, so that I can reselect it. So we'll just hook it into here, add to do. When a to do is, toggle to do. When a to do is toggled, we will set mark all to false. And let's see, what that does. So toggle and untoggle, and there we go. So now it's false. And then we can read toggle. So just like Vue.js, you're just hooking into things and changing state as you need them to be changed. All right, so let's do one more piece of functionality here, this clear completed, and then I'll ask if anybody has any questions when we talk about stuff. Clear completed, so clear completed, wire click, and then I'm just going to fire a method, clear completed, and then we'll make a method, clear completed. Okay, and then to do, I have a scope called completed, or complete maybe. Let me check. It's called complete. So complete, get them all, loop through them all, and delete them all. Okay. Hit there, and then when I clear completed, those two will disappear. Great. So the last step here is getting this filtering, and then we've done full feature completion onto MVC. If we click all, we should see all. If we click active, we should see unchecked, and if we click completed, we should see only the completed ones. So let's implement that functionality. All right. So I'm going to create this filter, and we'll start with it being all, okay? And then I'll have these buttons set that filter to a different string, like active or completed. And then instead of passing in all the to-dos, I'm just going to pass in a filtered set of to-dos. So I'll switch on this filter. So when filter is equal to all, I want to just return all of them. When it's not equal to all, I want to filter by is completed or not. So do where is complete. That's eloquent, by the way. If that's weird to you, eloquent automatically can do that. To do where is complete, and then I'll say this filter is equal to active. I might have gotten the Boolean wrong. I'm Boolean impaired, unfortunately. So let's just set this in here. Okay, so here's all active and completed. We'll add wire click. Here's something that you haven't seen. I could create a method that's called set filter or update filter, like this, and then pass in the specific filter that I want to filter by. But it gets messy. You end up creating all these little methods that just update a value. So I added this little feature, this little helper set, money sign set, kind of like Vue.js has. And then I can say set filter to, and then I can use, or then I can just pass in the value there. So active, completed. Right, so active and complete, and then we're almost there. Our goal is to set a selected class on the ones that are currently selected. So let's do that. And then we're basically saying if filter is equal to the current filter, then echo out selected. If not, empty string. Then I have to update these. Okay, and then complete. So I did a lot of code without refreshing. Chances are something doesn't work. Let's see. I'll add another one. We'll mark this as complete. And if I go to active, they're completely gone. So let's figure out what went wrong. So
You're missing a get.
So where is complete? Let me make sure that that is. So it is complete, and then this filter is equal to active, and we're setting filter to active and all and complete. Did anybody notice any weird syntax?
You don't call git after where is completed, Caleb.
Thank you. Nice. Cool. So I inverse the Boolean because I'm Boolean impaired. Okay, so let's try this again. Active, complete. There we go. And if we click that, it disappears, and now it's in the complete column. We can clear completed, and we're back here. We can toggle to-dos, we can remove to-dos, we can add to-dos, we get reflecting here, we can select all, we can deselect all. Okay, that was a long stretch, but we recreated to-do MVC in Livewire. The database is completely synced up to it. We wrote 0 manual AJAX requests, we wrote 0 route endpoints, and we wrote 0 JavaScript to achieve this functionality, which I think is pretty darn cool, if I do say so myself. So, real quick, anybody, or as long as you want, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns, anything?
In your CUMDC file, so all the public variables are available in the blade template. Do you protect it in private? Have like normal scope, or how would that work? If you just like.
So the question is, everything that's public is shown on the front end. Do I ever do something like this?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So the way that it works, I could set a property called Hey There, and it would be hidden from the front end. So you're right that the scope is attached to that. Protected and private properties don't show up, but they're not persisted. So if I had something and I went this hey equals something else, if I did that, then it could update. It wouldn't update the property. The property would be reset to there every time. So the idea is that you would pretty much only use things, only track state that's public, and then private things you would have to do another way. And there's other ways for sure. But my thinking behind that, originally I had it so that you could do that, and I encrypted the state, because the state doesn't live on the back end. It travels back and forth. So you would have to encrypt that, and I did, but I just feel really weird about encrypting something and sort of giving people the confidence that things are safe, and that if your app key gets revealed, or any number of things that could go wrong. Basically, I wanted to keep things as like, here are the things that are visible to everyone, and here are the things that are completely not and cannot be hacked. So that was my thinking behind that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, we'll see if it's a hurdle for a lot of people, and it's like something that people really need. Then I guess the options would be A, we encrypt the data and attempt that, which is fine, but encrypting also adds a bunch of speed. Encrypting and decrypting, it adds latency, and it adds a bunch of payload, because when you encrypt with Laravel, it multiplies the size of what you're encrypting by 6. So it quickly gets out of hand, and I'd be encrypting big like Laravel collections and stuff. But anyway, the other option would be to offer another way of using Livewire that would be WebSocket driven, and you wouldn't be passing state back and forth. I don't know. It's still in the early phases, and I'm trying to see what's the best balance. Yeah.
And this seems like a reasonable balance, because if you throw public attributes on everything and just say you're transferring state every single time, then people will build their applications as if they're mostly stateless, which is kind of how you should be doing it anyway, because you're putting stuff over HTTP.
Sure, right, exactly. They'll use things like caches and data, right, and so there won't, yes, definitely. I think you're right. Yeah.
What does, since, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So I guess it's like private properties will have their state reset and all that. What does like dependency injection look like for your Livewire components?
Yeah, good call. I think, stop me if this is not the question you were asking, but like if you if you wanted to inject like the request or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, something like that.
That kind of dependency injector needed?
Yeah, that are like a service class or something along those lines.
Got it. Yeah, so mount is, so I literally like ripped out the engine that dependency injects in Laravel's controller, and I use it. So you can do any dependency injection here. There's actually another, like Livewire 102 or 2.0, not 2.0, 102 class Livewire would, there's a way to use Livewire for whole pages, like each page is a component, and you wouldn't have to write a route, and then you could dependency inject things from your route. That probably doesn't make any sense to you, but let me flash the docs and maybe that will make sense. So spa mode for Livewire. You can render a component as an entire page, so if anybody can see this, can people read this? Is that way too small?
No,
It's good.
It's good. So normally you have a route and a controller, and then a controller that returns a view, and then in the view you include the Livewire component. But I mean that gets repetitive if you just have one Livewire component for the whole page. So Livewire can actually do this, route : Livewire, and you can just specify the route and then the component. And then if you have, say, route Livewire contact / ID, show contact Livewire component ID would come through the mount method, and then there's route model binding. So if you pass in user just like a normal controller method, it'll route model bind the user. So I don't know how familiar you are with route model binding or whatever, but that's how you would achieve dependency injection in Livewire. You can do some service, and then use that service. Or anywhere in Laravel, you can always app make. You could just app some service class, and it'll, it's just like dependency injection.
What does
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Since you mentioned, I think you kind of like mentioned this in an offhand comment. So, say for example, we're making a new to-do, and you want to do like input validation on the to-do. What does that look like?
Yeah. Good. Glad you asked. I'm excited to show you that one. All right. So let's say that we wanted to add some validation to. We'll just add it to this component here. It's pretty easy. So we're right here, title. We want to throw a validation message if title isn't there, so you can't add an empty to-do. All right, so how would we do this best? Let's do it in an updated hook. So updated title. All right, so titles, or I guess updating title. Updating title, value, updated title. I'm not thinking straight. Anyway, updated title. So that's a hook for after title's updated, and then let's say we want to validate that. Sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. This is just like a controller. In the add to-do method, before I actually add the to-do, we'll validate the data. So Livewire has a validation method, so validate, and it behaves pretty much, if you guys are familiar with like request validate, or I don't know what you use in your controllers, but I usually do this now. Request validate, and then you pass in the validation data, right? Familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So here you can do the same sort of deal. So we can just say we want title to be required, and it'll use the source of validation, the data that exists here. So we'll say this validate title required, and it's just like normal validation in a controller. A validation exception will be thrown, and the execution won't continue. Like it won't go past here because the validation exception will be thrown. Then you can catch the validation just the same way you would in Laravel. So if we wanted to show a validation message, we would do something like if there's an errors bag, just like Laravel. If errors has title, and if errors has title, then let's do, I don't know, we'll show a span with errors first title. Okay. Oh boy. All right. So let's refresh, and we're going to try to add an empty one. It says the title field is required. So you can add any sort of validation. So if we did, this is just Laravel validator. So anything you can do in Laravel validator, you can do here. We'll say min 6. So if anything's less than 6, we don't want to allow it. Interesting thing is you don't have to refresh pages in Livewire because it's all stateless AJAX requests. So I cannot refresh the page and use the new functionality I just put in. So I'll do this and I'll hit that and say title must be at least 6 characters. I can keep trying, and that's that. That answer your question, validation?
Yeah, completely. That's awesome.
It's actually one of the most powerful features, yeah, because like Livewire basically, I mean, it's really good at forms. It's good at a lot of things, but like for forms, it's a dream for me. Like you can have real-time validation, you can have on-click validation, you can have dynamic input, adding all sorts of stuff. Another thing I didn't show you is a loading indicator. So let's say, I'm gonna go back to this thing that I showed you earlier, and let's just pretend that the latency on the network is just insane. I think I just closed VS Code. Okay.
Oops.
Bear with me. It should only take a sec. Okay. So what was that one called? It was called counter. All right. So let's just say that when text is updated, it takes like 2 seconds. We'll add in a sleep, and let's just say, so I try to type in, and it takes 2 seconds, and then it loads, which is ridiculous. And so we want a loading wheel if we're expecting latency like that. So let's go to counter blade. Here's the input element right here. And we need to add a class. I think it's right here, is loading. That's the class. I'll refresh just to show you. So that's the class right there. So wire colon loading. You can add wire colon loading to anything. So maybe just to show you something else, we'll do this. Loading ... And then I'll say wire colon loading. Refresh. Okay. So when I type in here, it'll say loading. And then when it's gone, it'll be gone. There's lots of different syntax for this. So I can do wire colon loading .class, and then I can toggle classes on and off. So we'll say add the is loading class when we're loading. Refresh. Then I'm going to type right here, and we get the loading wheel until it's finished, and then the loading wheel's gone. So that's a super handy one that, with this approach, I have to build it expecting latency, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing like expensive queries, stuff like that, giving user feedback. Another cool thing, hopefully this works, wire transition fade. So there's transitions, it has the same, basically the same engine as Vue.js transitions. You're familiar with those, but I added a little helper called wire transition fade. So it's like an automatic fade transition for any element you want. So if I click this, didn't actually work. I think I got that right, but maybe not. Let me try one thing. And then if not, we'll just call this a demo fail. So type here, and it does not fade in because it must not fade in loading indicators. But anyhow, it's just because I started. If Boolean, then I want to show something. All right, and if I click this, we see something, and then we don't see something. Wire transition dot fade. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Yep. So it just doesn't work for wire loading because that's JavaScript toggling and not blade toggling. But super duper handy to get like nice, clean looking animations easily. Any other thoughts, questions?
What's in Livewire assets?
Yeah, good question. So I'll show you what it echoes out. It used to be the JavaScript of Livewire, just all echoed out on the page, but that's a bunch of unnecessary stuff, would add to your page load, and it wouldn't be cached, right? So it's the JavaScript, and it's a little bit of CSS, basically just for the wire loading. So it's CSS that hides any element that has wire loading until you click something. And that's pretty much the gist of it. I'll show it to you. So this Livewire assets is what it echoes out. I don't know if you can see that well. So Livewire assets, and it has this little bit of CSS, wire loading display none, and it references a script, but it includes the Livewire JavaScript file, which is 30 kilobytes, I think. It's small, it's pretty small. And then add event listener DOM content loaded, so it's like when the page loads, then start Livewire. Oh, and I add the CSRF token automatically, just so that all the AJAX requests have the CSRF token. Yeah, so that's what's in there. This is a whole fun story on how it does this. It's pretty ridiculous, actually. I don't know, it's probably too hard to explain right now, but this is a route, it's not an actual file, because a package can't make a file available, like when you just compose or require. My goal with Livewire is to be crazy simple, like you just use it instantly, and really familiar. And so I kind of obsessed over some of these things, like I really didn't want you to have to npm install Livewire, or have to, publish something to your assets, or there's nothing like that. So I got creative, and Livewire actually exposes a route in the core. It exposes a route called livewire/livewire.js, where it echoes out all the JavaScript, but it turns out that that's like not really easy to do because the browser knows it's PHP and it doesn't cache it. But yeah, so basically I have this route gets added when you install Livewire. Livewire/livewire.js. And then I add some caching headers to tell the browser to cache and pretend that it's a file. So the browser doesn't know that it's not a file. It's actually pretty crazy because when I update Livewire, I'm using Laravel Mix, and it'll version this file, so it'll cache bust everything, and you'll always have the latest Livewire. If anybody followed that, it was kind of a fun little task for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So sorry, I
Good
apologize
question.
if you covered this already, but how is this available now? Is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, I did not cover that already. Let me give you the final slide. So livewire-framework.com. You're the first to see this. It's not available right now. Basically, follow me on Twitter and sign up for the email updates, and I'll reach out as soon as it is available, and you'll know. So here is livewireframework.com. Here's the jellyfish, because jellyfish are electric and wires are also electric. Yeah, so it's this little kind of manifesto. It's a little manifesto that's like the shortest version of the beginning of the talk that I just did. JavaScript's crazy these days, So my little pitch, and then place to sign up for my email newsletter, where I send all sorts of updates on Livewire. So anybody who's been following since the beginning, they're on the email list, and I send them like when I post blog posts or tutorials or stuff like that. I know it's weird to have something that's private and hype it, but basically I wanted full control. I opened it up publicly for a little bit, and I immediately knew, like, this is how something devolves, how a project devolves when so many voices are pull requesting and submitting issues, and you need to focus. So that was my goal, was just to focus, and I user tested Livewire with probably over 15 people now, like 2 or 3 hour long user tests where I had people pull it in and use it, and I would take notes and everything. So I tried to hone it that way. But the missing piece is it being used in production. There's only one person using it in production, and the more people I can get using it, the better. So if you're actually interested in using it and being a part of like finding and reporting bugs, I would love that. If you reached out to me, I would love someone to come in and start contributing in that way. But yeah, so unfortunately for now, the docs are all public. So you can look through all the docs, and they're pretty thorough and hopefully easy to follow. And yeah, and I imagine, so I quit my job. I worked at Titan, a Laravel agency, and I quit my job to just go on sabbatical, programming sabbatical, and Livewire was my muse. So I worked on Livewire every day for, I don't know, 3 months. And so I didn't make any money in that time, and so there's part of me that's like, how can I monetize this? But I want it to be open source. So I'm still toying with an idea of like selling like stickers or something for people to get into the repo early or something. I don't know. I haven't exactly figured it out. But if you're actually willing to contribute, I'm more than welcome people to just DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open, and I'll get you into the repository to start, playing with it.
Cool. And another general question, have you done any testing to see performance gains versus jQuery or Vue or whatever else?
Oh, gotcha. So it uses, yeah, right. So I guess unfortunately, I have to hop on the soapbox really quick because I had this whole slide about how, like, when React was becoming popular, Angular was king, React was becoming popular, and Vue, and there was this whole, like, one of their this big sell was React uses virtual DOM, which is a lot faster than Angular using normal DOM. And then Vue came out, and Vue is still faster than React. Vue doesn't re-render the whole thing, it tracks certain dependencies, it doesn't re-render the whole tree. And now Svelte is a new JavaScript framework that people are kind of oohing and eyeing about, that only re-renders the specific parts of the app that change because of precompilers. Anyway, I say all this to say that Angular 1 would have been plenty fast for every app I've ever written. Like, jQuery was fast. Like the needs of the things I'm doing. I'd like to toggle things. I'd like to make stuff like move around and hide and show data and remove it. I'm not generally rendering big complex animations at 60 frames per second. So I guess I say all that to say that Livewire is not something that's it's not meant for somebody who needs fast JavaScript. That would be a JavaScript framework or even native raw JavaScript. It's not good for animations. It's not good for things that need it really fast. But the request, the AJAX request, is the hang-up. The JavaScript's relatively fast. It actually uses the same internal DOM diffing tool that Phoenix LiveView does. And in some cases, that's faster than virtual DOM implementations in Vue. I used Vue's actual virtual DOM implementation for a little bit, but yeah, so I guess it's one of those things that, like, performance isn't a virtue in itself. It's always a trade-off with other things. But really, to answer the question, I think your backend will be the bottleneck. The AJAX requests will certainly be the bottleneck. The actual DOM manipulation won't be the bottleneck. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts along those lines, like performance and anything like that?
Does the request lifecycle for this, for the route that actually handles the back and forth between the component on the Laravel side and the component on the browser side, go through the standard Laravel stack of middlewares, or does it have kind of its own little way of doing things that might be a little bit quicker on that side?
Right, that's an area of optimization that might end up being a way to go. It doesn't right now. It does the full Laravel stack. And the reason I did that is I thought it would be a better default for, like, let's say you have middleware that handles authorization, like an admin can, like non-admins can't view this page. So a non-admin somehow hijacks a livewire component to fire off to an admin livewire component. Anyway, I did it so that whatever middleware stack is used on the first request, I encrypt that stack, because Laravel, there's a method on the request to get the current middleware. I encrypt that, and then I basically load up that middleware stack every subsequent AJAX request. But I'm sure there are performance gains. I think it just is a matter of somebody smart coming along, thinking it through, and saying, you know, you could do without X, Y, and Z, and it would speed it up, you know.
Cool. Thanks for that info.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else?
How big is the production app that you said somebody already has an app in production? How big is that? Do you know?
Oh, yeah. I don't know actually the size per se, but I know that the needs are, it's like a data heavy app, and it's forms, a lot of forms and a lot of tables, like data tables type stuff. They used to handle it data tables and their own view tables stuff. And now they're using Livewire. So I don't know. But the nice thing is, when it was WebSockets, that was my big concern. It was like WebSockets are pretty hard to scale. So that's why people just use Pusher. Because every single connection is a persistent open process, PHP process on the server. So, I mean, you get like, the default is 1,000 connections and then it breaks. Other than that, you have to like manually vertically scale. And then horizontal scaling is crazy. So switching to Ajax is like, oh, well, I mean, it scales as well as Ajax scales. So if you're using Ajax requests, Livewire will work the same. If your Ajax requests are slow, then Livewire will be slow. If it's fast, then Livewire will be fast.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Any other thoughts, questions?
It looks very cool. Having just been doing a lot of jQuery stuff, yeah, this looks good.
Cool.
I can't wait to
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm hoping it's something. I'm hoping it's a tool for people in the middle ground that are using jQuery or using Vue but overusing it and just need just like front end interactions, sensible front end interactions, and something that's easy to use. You know. Yeah, it works well with JavaScript too. I didn't demo any of that stuff, but it actually works with Vue. So you can actually, if you're familiar with Vue, you can use Vue components and wire. You can wire model to Vue components that you would normally vmodel to. That's pretty great. Like this one is a pretty crazy feature that I got in the week a little bit, but it's pretty clean, and I've tested it and it works fine. So I mean, at least for my test. So you can use, like, if you had a Vue component loading spinner, you could wire loading on that loading spinner, you know. So if you have Vue components in your app that you really need because they need to be really performant and front end wise, then you can do that. Web components, I don't know if anybody's familiar with web components, but web components are perfect for Livewire because they're scope and they're atomic, and so if anybody uses web components, then web components work with every framework, which is why they're so great. Yeah, there's a bunch of other cool stuff. If anybody wants to just poke around, there's some stuff on testing, CSS transitions, nesting components. You can nest and have like children components. Events, there's an event system. It can hook into Laravel Echo, so you can have actual WebSocket, like real time. You could make a chat app with Livewire that would real time, you know, update. You could make a shopping cart with real time stuff. You can redirect from Livewire components, and And that's the gist, yeah. Okay, great. So I think that's pretty much it as far as stuff that I have to show you. Like I said, Twitter is where I'm at. I tweet quite often, and I try to make it valuable, like hot tip tweets and I don't know, just general information as I develop Laravel in general. So follow me on Twitter if you don't. That's a great way to follow my work. I also have a blog, calebporzio.com, and I write about a blog post a week, and I send out an email newsletter a week. And one of my big things, I always forget this, I have a podcast, No Plans to Merge, and we publish a podcast every Friday, and we've been doing it for a long time. If you've ever heard of 20% Time, I don't know, that was our old podcast. My partner Daniel Colborn and I, he works at Titan, and I used to work at Titan, popular Laravel agency. So yeah, so that's where you can find me and dig into my stuff. Great, so that's pretty much it for me. I would love to hear some feedback on this talk because I'm going to give it to other meetups this week. I have 3 other meetups this week, and I would love to know what were points of confusion, boredom, controversy, things you liked. I'd love any of it. Don't hold back.
All right.
I think the only thing that I noticed, and there's never really a good point to call it out, and it also may not be a recurring theme, is whenever you're switching windows, I don't know if this is a Zoom or network problem, might need to go like a little bit slower, just solely because sometimes Zoom would leave an artifact in the previous window on top of the other ones. So we get like an abstract painting of the 2 windows for a few seconds, and then finally the network would catch up. And
Right. Yeah, that's a bummer. And you also can't experience how smooth it is. I forget that streaming. I guess you'll just have to take my word for it that the 2 MVC, the view one and the livewire one, are the same speed. They feel the same amount responsive.
admittedly, it
You would be
did
able
look
to tell
pretty
that.
smooth with the
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
stream.
The
So
only issue that I saw there was that when you were demoing the fade bit, which absolutely include that in the demo, same thing with validation, include that without people asking you because that's a super important use case. But in the fade side of things, it wasn't as obvious that the fade was happening. You kind of had to look for it, and it looked a little bit janky. That was definitely an issue with the streaming side.
Right. That's perfect, and you're totally right. The validation needs to be in there, just so you can see the glory of the fade. If I still have it, .fade. I think I can add, like, let's say 2 seconds, and it'll extend it to 2 seconds. Yeah. So, no. If that's any more impressive.
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
It takes milliseconds too, so that's cool. Okay, good. That's funny, right? Because you wouldn't really. Oh, well, that totally didn't work. Oh, 500 seconds. Yeah, there you go. So, cool, awesome, good tip. Oh, I forgot that I was still sharing. So, any other feedback is totally appreciated. Keep it coming.
It doesn't seem like there's much more, but if
I might tweet at you later on Twitter. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just give a positive feedback that.
Oh, cool.
That your talk started well. I appreciated kind of the overview. Your soapbox didn't bother me at all.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Sounded like you were speaking from knowledge and not opinion.
Nice. Good. Glad. I'm glad it came off that way. Thank you.
what I liked is that it framed it, instead of just being like, here's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, it definitely framed it in the, here's a problem that exists and here's my solution to that problem. So,
Gotcha.
great work.
Cool. How is the portion of GitHub where I show you like how GitHub handles that HTML? Does that connect a few dots? Is that a good like segue into the technology?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think
Because that gives like, okay, this is not a super new idea, but it's a new idea as applied to Laravel. So, yeah, it works perfectly.
Yeah, it's a great validator.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah, I'm so glad that GitHub does this kind of stuff so that I can say like, so I mean, if anybody's like, does these techniques like Ajaxing HTML, does it scale? Like, does GitHub scale? Then it scales. Nice. Anything else?
The general read of the room looks like nothing else.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you guys so much for having me. I already gave you all the sign-offs, so I really appreciate it. And DM me if you have any, if you want to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Caleb.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Cool. All
Have a good
right.
night.
Thank you guys.
All right, now before everyone runs
Enjoy your pizza.
Thanks, yeah. Before everyone runs out of the room, unless you don't want to give a happy chance to win a cool free thing, if you're not aware, we hosted a PHP conference in Austin last month, Longhorn PHP. Part of the swag we were giving away were these awesome little notebook things. We had a few left over, and I was able to grab 2 to raffle off in just such an occasion. So I'm going to raffle both of these off. So if you'd like one, stick around. Is raffle still up and running?
Should be.
Let's find out.
Yep.
If I remember the
I threw money at Twilio recently enough that it should be fine.
Okay.
Right.
So. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with the system, send a text message to the number on screen with the code also on screen. I'll give everyone a moment to figure it all out. Ian's the one who built this, so I promise and he promises, and also this code is public on GitHub, that we're not actually just saving all these phone numbers to sell to a database.
They're in a database, however, I don't care that they're in a database.
Yeah, and they go to Twilio, and then whatever Twilio does is what Twilio does.
You take way too much effort to scan.
Is that the same phone number?
Yes, it is. Let me make sure that.
I wonder how much money if you could get a short code.
About $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month.
Never mind. There went that.
We actually did that for favor, and it was a chore to get it set up. Make sure.
Did anybody else?
Check.
It ain't working.
I should be ready for that. I don't have the.
Check
Yeah.
to look in the,
Console.
yeah, well, not necessarily console, but in the network requests.
Yeah, it's making things.
Yeah.
It's just getting back up.
Empty radio stuff.
Yeah.
Stand by while I figure out why my stuff's broken.
For some Wi-Fi.
So while we could rebuild Raffle and Livewire. It'd be like, what, the 5th time that you've rebuilt Raffle?
More than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Ian does some live demo-ish patching. We do have some pizza left over and some soda. I am not going to eat it because I can't due to the whole celiac thing. So please take the pizza home so it's not going to waste. Same with the soda. Even if y'all need the Dr. Pepper, I will definitely take care of that. But the Sprite, I'm not as married to if there's even any left. So please help yourselves. Nothing like a
the first year, or every day? Okay, what's the year?
So who's gonna buy a new Mac Pro?
I'm on the market right now for a Windows-based laptop
Yeah.
at the moment. So,
Same here.
yeah.
I don't know. Who's
Right.
that?
Who's
The bigger
gonna buy it?
question
Yeah.
is going to be like, who's going to buy that
Can't
new
afford it.
monitor?
All of the
Well,
people
that's
who
it,
are locked into.
Like 4 or 5 grand.
It's 11 grand if you want the whole system.
Oh my gosh.
The stand for the monitor is $1,000.
Oh my gosh.
To stand alone.
Yes,
The monitor is $5 grand. The computer's $5 grand. Or is it $6 grand?
6 grand.
Yeah.
for the minimum configuration, you
But
should get.
yeah, so it's 12 grand.
Kind of turned me off today.
I
But
saw,
boy, it looks cool.
I saw the price for it. I'm like, I want a new monitor. My new gaming rig.
But that doesn't.
Yeah, can technically push like 4K and more, but I could also just buy a 4K monitor that's made for gaming with all the right refresh rates and everything, and it'd be significantly less than 5K. So I'm more excited. It kind of sucks because I mean, they didn't announce anything for laptops. I would like them to announce laptops, and I'd like them to basically pull the, hey, you know how the trash can was really fucking stupid for Mac Pros? So we undid that. We realized the touch bar kind of really stupid, so we're gonna actually like make the damn things more powerful and something else that makes them unique and useful, so I can justify buying a new one for my own personal use. Because otherwise, yeah, I'm seriously considering buying a Windows laptop and just dual booting it or nuking it with some Linux distro.
Why not a Linux laptop?
Hmm?
Or like Linux distribution laptop?
I've thought about it. I even looked at the Pop OS like laptops because I'm looking at Pop OS primarily because that's what Ian uses, and I'm kind of going off if Ian likes the setup, then I probably will too, since he's more of a power user.
Yeah, but I have a high pain tolerance.
Fair, but that's also the benefit. If I start using Pop OS too, I can just annoy you to help me fix my problems.
That's also true.
I thought about those, but
There's not as big a market.
Yeah.
What makes it tough?
there's not a lot of market, and also like if I wanted to do like kind of the same laptop Ian has, I haven't really seen like Pop OS offer the touchscreen type thing. Which partly is because Linux and touchscreen is kind of hit or miss right now.
It works.
I have one on mine.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
so cancel that one out because I don't want to win.
Okay. I'm assuming I can just go back.
Yeah.
I'll just select winners and go on the text. Hey, look, Logan. You're not Logan. Ian, whatever.
Apparently SSL broke again, so.
Oh yeah, I did notice the no lock thing.
Yeah, SSL broke out. The Twilio webhook is hitting the SSL endpoint, and I just have to fix that. Twilio is really helpful in emails you on the first error. It's like, hey, I couldn't hit your web. You're like, what was it? Oh.
Okay, so take 2, text the same number with the code on screen. Spoiler alert, it's exactly the same code as before, but with a 1 instead of a 0 at the end. It took me like 3+ years to finally realize the code is actually just the ID of the raffle. Good job, Hunter. We've got 5 entrants. Is that everybody who's interested? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. Everyone's in. Clicking select winners. And drum roll. If your number ends in 9424 or 7906, you.
I did one of these.
Here you go. Thanks everybody for entering. I'm hoping to get more stuff to raffle off soon, and if we have leftover stickers, I might actually try and track some down so I can just give those away for free.
My pen doesn't have an elephant on
None of them do. I don't even know how much that would have cost to do. Yeah, so for a lot of the new faces, this year I've been kind of changing things up and kind of organizing the meetups in these, what I've been calling mega topics or categories. So for the first 3 months of the year, we talked a lot about Laravel's framework internals. And this is now the last meetup of our second main category for the year, which has been very much front-end focused. Case in point, Livewire demo. Next month will be the beginning of a database focused set of talks. So I have some ideas buried in my notes. I know one of them that I had off the top of my head was kind of doing a comparison of MySQL versus Postgres. And I need to either find someone who can talk really well about that, or I've got a month to start doing a lot of research and prepping for that talk myself. I wouldn't consider us using Postgres at work because we're using Redshift and AWS, which is like Postgres, just missing like half the shit that makes Postgres useful.
I volunteer, Justin.
Okay. If you would like to. And then the last half of the year, or there's 4 halves in the year. For the last quarter of the year, we'll be doing a lot of testing related topic. I have 0 ideas on what those talks would be like, but if at any point in time these basically next 6 potential talk slots interest you in doing something about database or testing, even if you're a first time speaker, reach out to me. I actually enjoy having first time speakers a little bit more than seasoned ones, just because this is a nice, like, smaller, more comfortable environment for you to practice and get good feedback and get better at it, so you can start being an Ian and talking at all the conferences and talking at all the meetups. So,
But preferably less of a jerk than me.
so if you've got an idea, if you think it'd fit in well, let me know. If you've got a talk idea that you're not sure if it really fit into the categories, reach out anyway. If I'm having a hard time sourcing something and your schedule is available and flexible, then I will gladly just break the category theme and slot you in for a time speaking slot. So, all right, it's now 3 whole minutes over time. I'm sure Capital Factory's gonna start trying to kick us out soon, and y'all probably want to go home. So thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Hope to see y'all next month.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Evan.
you. Appreciate it.
Let me use my card. I'd love to talk more about it. Go for it. Thank you so much.
Good talk.
Yeah, it was
He's a
really
good
good.
speaker. Pretty interested in investing in his material too.
Yeah, and
Since he wrote it.
I'm sad that things worked out the way they did, but I'm also like really glad, because initially we were supposed to have 2 speakers tonight and split the time between Caleb and Livewire.
That would have been a horrible idea.
Yeah, and Nick Basile doing a presentation on like CSS UX stuff with Tailwind,
Yeah.
which both are great things to